Hello and welcome to Learn English with Technology podcast series.
Okay.
This is episode 26. Today we're taking a deep dive into the future of English learning. We're going to be exploring how the metaverse could completely change the way we learn English, and we've got a ton of research articles and expert opinions to go through, so let's just jump right in.
I think what's really fascinating with this topic is we're not just talking about like small improvements or, incremental changes. The metaverse has the potential to create a totally immersive experience, almost like you're stepping into another world to learn English.
Okay, so paint me a picture. What would it actually be like to learn English in this virtual world?
So imagine you're walking down a street in like a virtual London, right?
Uh-huh.
And the sights and sounds around you are so realistic because of things like spatial audio and, really advanced graphics, and you need to like stop and ask somebody for directions.
Okay.
And with haptic gloves, you could actually feel like the cobblestones beneath your feet.
Wait, hold on. Haptic gloves. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, right? But research is showing that that kind of tactile learning can really help people remember vocabulary better.
Huh.
So you're not just seeing and hearing the words, you're actually feeling them too, which creates a much stronger connection in your brain.
That's amazing. So you're not just learning about English, you're living it in this virtual world.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond vocabulary too. The metaverse can actually analyze your body language and give you feedback on your posture and your hand gestures, all these things that can help you master nonverbal communication.
Wow, it's like having a personal coach, but one who's focused on your total communication, not just your grammar, but how does the system even know what to teach you? Is it like a set course that everyone follows?
Not at all. It actually uses artificial intelligence to create a unique learning journey for every single person. So it starts by building this really detailed learner profile. It analyzes your strengths and your weaknesses, your learning style, and even your interests.
So it's kind of like having a custom-made English course that changes as you learn more.
Precisely. And it's not just about adjusting the difficulty. If it sees that you're spending a lot of time interacting with, let's say, objects in a virtual coffee shop, it might start teaching you more vocabulary related to coffee and cafes.
Wow, that's really smart.
Yeah.
All this personalization, the AI, this virtual world, it must take a ton of processing power, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's where the metaverse's network infrastructure comes in. It relies heavily on something called edge computing, which basically means there are these hundreds of mini supercomputers all over the world that are processing data super fast.
Okay, so instead of my voice data going all the way to some central server, it's being handled by a server that's physically closer to me.
Exactly. And that means there's very little lag, so conversations feel supernatural, even if you're talking to someone on the other side of the planet.
That is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. It's like the internet itself has gotten smarter.
It has, in a way, and it's also incredibly stable. They've built in all these backup systems so that even if your internet connection drops for a second, your learning won't be interrupted.
That's a huge relief.
Yeah.
I hate it when I'm in the middle of something and the internet cuts out, but all this amazing technology wouldn't mean much without great content, right?
You're absolutely right, and this is where the metaverse's content management system really shines. It's not just a massive library of lessons. It's this incredibly sophisticated system that organizes information in these interconnected knowledge webs.
Okay, so instead of feeling like I'm jumping between random lessons, it feels more like I'm exploring this giant interconnected world of knowledge.
Exactly, and it uses AI to deliver the content almost instantly need to know about the past perfect tense. Boom! You got it? No need to click through menus or wait for pages to load.
That sounds incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
What about learners who have different learning styles? I mean, does everyone just get the same content?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. They have this really clever versioning system, so each piece of content actually exists in multiple versions, each one optimized for a specific learning style or proficiency level.
Oh, so like a visual learner might get a version that's full of images and videos, while someone who learns better through audio might get a version with more recordings.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just the learning materials themselves. The metaverse also has what they call a media asset management system, which basically means they're bringing the lessons to life with these really high-quality images, videos, animations, you name it.
So it's not just about reading text on a screen anymore. It's about experiencing the language with all your senses.
Yes, and the best part is the content is constantly being updated and expanded. They even have this engine that can actually create new scenarios based on your individual needs and interests.
Wait, so it can make new content on the fly. That's Incredible.
It is, but with all this incredible technology, it also raises some really interesting questions about how the system actually keeps track of your progress as a learner.
That's a great point. With all this personalization in AI, are there even tests in the metaverse?
That's actually one of the coolest things about how the metaverse handles assessment. It moves away from these traditional one-time tests and embraces continuous real-time feedback. So you're constantly getting insights into how you're doing, not just a score at the end of a unit.
So you always know your strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and the system can adjust your learning path as you go.
Precisely. And the feedback isn't just about telling you if you're right or wrong. One of the most impressive features is the real-time pronunciation scoring.
Okay, now I have to hear more about this. How does that work?
It uses some very advanced acoustic analysis to create a 3D model of your speech patterns, and then it compares that to native speaker samples. You can actually see how your pronunciation is improving and get specific tips on how to adjust your tongue and lip movements to get the sounds just right.
That's amazing. It's like having a personal pronunciation coach right there with you.
It really is, and it goes beyond just pronunciation. They also have this interactive grammar analysis system that shows you the impact of your grammar choices. So let's say you make a mistake with a conditional tense. The system might show you a virtual scenario where you can see how that grammar choice actually changes the outcome.
That's a really cool way to learn grammar because it makes it relevant to real life.
Exactly, and the system also keeps track of how well you're retaining vocabulary. It learns how you learn best and adapts its methods accordingly. So if you're a visual learner, for instance, it might use more pictures and videos to help you remember new words.
Wow. So the assessment system is just as personalized and intelligent as the rest of the metaverse experience. But with all this data being collected, how do they make sure learner privacy is protected?
That's a really important question, and that's where the metaverse's security and privacy features come into play. They use incredibly strong encryption to protect all your data. That includes things like your personal information and your learning history.
So it's kind of like having a bodyguard for your data.
Exactly, and they also have multiple layers of protection to keep learners safe within the virtual environment itself. So they have a system for monitoring and preventing inappropriate behavior, and they've put in really strong filters to make sure the content is age appropriate.
That's really important, especially when you're talking about a platform that could connect people from all over the world. But with all this monitoring, does it feel like Big Brother is watching you all the time?
Not at all. They've done a really good job of finding that balance between safety and freedom.
Mm.
You have a lot of control over your privacy settings. You can choose exactly what information you want to share. And they've also developed these adaptive security protocols that are constantly learning from global patterns to stop problems before they even start.
Okay, that's reassuring. It sounds like they're really taking security seriously.
Yeah.
But beyond just protecting data, what about the emotional well-being of learners? Is that something the system addresses?
It absolutely does. And this is one of the areas where the metaverse really stands out. They've actually built in something called emotional safety monitoring.
Okay, what exactly does that mean?
They use something called sentiment analysis to figure out when a learner might be feeling frustrated or discouraged or just overwhelmed. And then the system can adjust the learning experience to offer extra support or encouragement.
That's incredible. So it's not just about teaching English, it's about creating a supportive and positive learning environment.
Exactly. And that holistic approach is what makes the metaverse such a game changer for language learning.
This has been an amazing look at the tech behind Metaverse English learning. It's mind-blowing to see how all these complex systems work together to create such a personalized and immersive learning experience. But beyond the technology, I'm really curious to explore what the actual learning experience is like. How does it compare to traditional methods, and what are some of the potential drawbacks we need to be aware of?
Those are great questions, and that's exactly what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at how the metaverse actually makes learning fun and engaging. We'll explore the social side of learning in a virtual world, and we'll examine some of the potential challenges this technology might bring.
This is definitely a conversation you won't want to miss, so make sure to stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the future of English learning in the metaverse. And before we go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who's ever dreamed of mastering English. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment below and tell us what you're most excited about when it comes to the metaverse. Thanks for listening.
So picking up right where we left off, let's dig a little deeper into what the actual learning experience is like in the metaverse. One of the most exciting things that a lot of researchers are talking about is this idea of embodied learning.
Embodied learning. Okay. I'm not familiar with that term.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it basically means that you're not just sitting there passively taking in information, You're actively using your body and your senses to interact with the virtual world. Remember those haptic gloves we talked about?
Yeah, the ones that let you feel textures in the virtual world.
Exactly. So those gloves combined with the spatial audio and the super realistic visuals, it all comes together to give you this feeling of actually being present in that virtual world. And there's a lot of research showing that that kind of full body experience can lead to much deeper learning and better memory retention.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between reading about how to play tennis and actually getting out on the court and hitting the ball yourself.
Exactly. And this whole idea of active embodied learning, it gets taken to a whole new level when you bring in the metaverse's gamification features.
Right, we touched on that a little bit in the last part. How does the metaverse actually turn English learning into a game?
Well, instead of just doing exercises and drills, you're going on quests, you're earning achievements, you're leveling up your English skills. It really taps into that natural human desire for rewards and recognition, which makes the learning process way more engaging and motivating.
So it's not just about memorizing grammar rules. It's about actually using those rules to solve problems and achieve goals within the game.
Exactly. And the rewards aren't just meaningless points or badges either. They can unlock new content, new areas of the virtual world to explore, even new abilities within the game.
Wow, that's really clever.
Yeah.
It creates this kind of positive feedback loop where the more you learn, the more you want to learn. But I could also see this approach feeling a little too structured, like you're always being led down a specific path.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. But the cool thing about the metaverse is that all this gamification stuff, it's layered on top of this really personalized learning journey.
Yeah.
So while you're having fun completing quests and earning rewards, you're also making progress through a curriculum that's been specifically designed for you and your goals.
So the gamification is kind of like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Exactly. And speaking of personalization, one of the things I find most exciting about the metaverse is how it approaches feedback and assessment.
I'm curious to hear more about we talked about the real-time pronunciation scoring and the interactive grammar analysis, but what else does the metaverse offer in terms of feedback?
Well, it goes way beyond just pointing out your mistakes and giving you the right answers. The metaverse gives you this much more holistic view of your progress. Like, imagine a 3D skill tree that actually visualizes your language abilities growing and branching out as you master new concepts. You can actually see your progress unfolding right in front of you.
That's definitely a lot more engaging than just staring at a list of scores or grades. Does the system also give you feedback on your overall communication style, not just things like grammar and
Oh,
pronunciation?
absolutely. The AI can actually analyze your interactions with other characters in the virtual world and give you feedback on things like your clarity, your confidence, your ability to get your message across effectively.
It's like having a personal communication coach who's watching your every move. But isn't there a risk that learners could become too reliant on the system's feedback? What about developing their own critical thinking skills?
That's a really important point, and it's something that the developers are very aware of. The goal isn't to create learners who are completely dependent on the system. It's about giving them the tools and the support they need to become independent, confident communicators.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between providing guidance and encouraging learners to think for themselves.
Exactly. And one of the ways the metaverse does this is through its social learning features. Remember, we're not just talking about a solitary learning experience here. The metaverse connects learners from all over the world, creating this really vibrant and supportive community.
Right? Learning a language in isolation can be really tough. It's much more motivating and enjoyable when you have other people to practice with and learn from.
Absolutely. And the metaverse makes that social learning happen in a bunch of different ways. They've got these really sophisticated algorithms that can pair you up with conversation partners who have similar learning goals and skill levels.
So you're not just chatting with random people, you're talking to people who can actually help you improve your English.
Exactly. And they also have these global classroom connections, which means you can attend virtual classes and workshops with students from all over the world. You get to experience different teaching styles, learn about different cultures, and practice your English in a more structured environment.
It sounds like a truly global language learning experience. What about more casual interactions? Are there opportunities to just hang out and socialize with other learners?
Oh, for sure. The metaverse has all sorts of social spaces, virtual cafes and parks, museums, art galleries, you name it. You can strike up conversations with other learners, join clubs and societies, even participate in group projects like virtual escape rooms or community theater productions.
That's awesome. It sounds like a ton of fun. And it's a great way to practice your English in a more relaxed and natural setting. But with all this emphasis on virtual interaction, Do you think there's a risk that learners might become too detached from the real world?
That's a question that researchers are definitely looking into. The metaverse offers some really incredible opportunities for language learning and cultural exchange, but it's important to remember that it is still a virtual environment. The ultimate goal is to give learners the skills and the confidence to use their English in real-world situations.
So it's not about replacing real-life interactions. It's more about using the metaverse as a tool to prepare for those interactions.
Exactly. And that brings us to some of the potential challenges that we need to keep in mind as this technology continues to develop.
Okay, let's talk about the potential downsides. What are some of the things we should be thinking about?
Well, one concern is the issue of accessibility. VR headsets and other equipment can be pretty expensive, which could create a situation where only people with enough money can really take advantage of the metaverse learning experience.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It'd be a shame if this amazing technology only benefited a select few.
Another challenge is the potential for misuse or abuse. Just like any online platform, the metaverse could be vulnerable to harassment, bullying, or even more serious forms of misconduct. So the developers really need to be proactive about putting strong safety measures in place and making sure it's a respectful and inclusive environment for everyone.
For sure, safety should be a top priority, especially with a technology that could be so immersive and potentially addictive.
Exactly. And another challenge is the potential for bias in the AI systems that power the metaverse.
What do you mean by bias?
Well, if the AI is trained on data that reflects existing societal biases, then those biases could end up being baked into the metaverse. So, for example, if the AI is mostly exposed to examples of American English, it might unfairly penalize learners who speak other dialects or accents.
That's a really important consideration. The developers need to be super careful about the data they use to train these systems and make sure that the metaverse is truly inclusive and welcoming to learners from all backgrounds.
Absolutely. And finally, there's this question of whether the metaverse could actually become a substitute for real life experiences rather than a complement to them.
So instead of using their English skills to travel the world and experience different cultures, learners might just end up staying plugged into the metaverse.
It's definitely a possibility and something we need to be mindful of. The metaverse can be incredibly engaging and rewarding, but it's important to remember that it is still a virtual world.
Right. It's an amazing tool for learning and connecting,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't replace those real-life experiences and relationships.
Exactly. And as with any new technology, I think it's important to approach the metaverse with a healthy dose of skepticism and critical thinking.
This has been a really fascinating exploration of what it's actually like to learn English in the metaverse and some of the potential challenges we need to consider. It's clear that the metaverse has the power to completely change the way we learn languages, but it's also important to be aware of the possible downsides and make sure this technology is developed and used responsibly.
I completely agree. As we move into the final part of our deep dive, we'll shift our focus to the future of this technology. What are some of the exciting developments on the horizon, and what kind of impact could the metaverse have on the wider world of education and language learning?
Okay, so we've talked about the incredible technology behind the metaverse, and we've really dug into what the learning experience is like. But now I want to look ahead. What's next for English learning in this virtual world?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. We're just starting to see what's possible. One of the most exciting areas is how AI and virtual reality are going to work together.
We've already talked about how AI is used for things like personalized learning and assessment, but how could that evolve even further?
Just imagine AI-powered virtual teachers that can actually change their teaching style to fit your needs, and they can do it in real time. Like they could analyze your facial expressions, your tone of voice, even your eye movements to see if you're really understanding and adjust their approach based on that.
Wow, that would be like having a personal tutor who's totally in sync with how you're feeling and thinking.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond just one-on-one. Teaching AI could be used to create these dynamic group learning experiences where you're connecting with other learners from all over the world who have similar goals or interests. Like, imagine a virtual classroom where students from different countries are working together on projects, sharing their perspectives, learning about each other's cultures.
That sounds amazing. It could
Yeah.
really break down those geographical barriers and create this global community of English learners.
Exactly. And as the technology keeps getting better, we're going to see even more creative ways to use AI in the metaverse. Like researchers are already looking into natural language processing to build virtual environments that respond to your voice commands, which would make the whole experience even more immersive and intuitive.
So you could literally talk your world into existence.
Kind of. You could say something like, take me to a busy market in Mumbai, and the metaverse would instantly create that environment for you with the sights, the sounds, maybe even the smells.
That's incredible. It would be like stepping right into one of those choose your own adventure books, but for language learning.
Yeah, and that sense of adventure is something that developers are really focusing on. They're creating quests and challenges that take you on these virtual journeys to different parts of the world. So you're immersed in new cultures and you're using your English in all sorts of real world situations.
Like gamification on a global scale.
Exactly. And this gamified approach could be used for learning all kinds of things, not just English. Imagine using the metaverse to learn about history or science or art. You could walk through ancient Rome. You could do experiments in a virtual lab. You could explore the Louvre all without leaving your house.
The possibilities are endless. It could revolutionize how we learn about everything.
I think so. And it's important to remember that this technology isn't just for individual learners. Schools and universities are already starting to use the metaverse in their classrooms and for remote learning.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would definitely be more engaging and interactive than just sitting through a regular online class. Huh.
Exactly. And it could open up opportunities for people who might not have access to traditional education, maybe because of where they live or because of a disability or because they can't afford it.
So the metaverse could make education more accessible to everyone.
That's the idea. Of course, there are still some challenges to overcome, like we talked about in the last part, but the potential benefits are so huge that I really believe this technology is going to be a big part of the future of learning.
Well, this deep dive into the metaverse has been absolutely fascinating. It's amazing to think about a future where learning is more personalized, more engaging, and more accessible than ever before. A future where we can connect with people from all over the world, and language is no longer a barrier. And that's it for a deep dive into the future of English learning in the metaverse. We hope you found this exploration as exciting as we did. We always love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let us know what parts of the metaverse you're most excited about, or maybe even a little worried about. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might be interested in the future of language learning. Thanks for joining us.